Hey guys, welcome back to another video. My name's Regan and this is Regan Writes. So today I wanted to do something a little bit different for a writing video. Most of my other videos so far have been me actually writing or talking about my writing. But today I wanted to do something that was not necessarily involving me actually writing or talking about my story about that much. Instead, what I wanted to do, as you can probably tell by the title, is I wanted to use this program. I'll put like a little screenshot here. I wanted to use this program to input my story and see who I most write like, because basically there's this website online where you can input any writing of yours. I think it's mostly meant for like fictional stuff. You get a chunk of your work, put it into this program, and then it filters through, I guess, loads of different popular authors or famous authors throughout history, modern authors as well, and it basically just tells you who you most write like, and I was interested to see who I most write like. So before we get into it, I'm gonna go get a cup of coffee and then we'll get into it. As you know, I am a bitch for autumn, and so I've kind of started already decorating for Halloween and autumn. I'll show you a little bit. So around the window, we've just got this, like, some people call it tacky. I think it's festive. Some tinsel, like Halloween-y tinsel, like pumpkins on it. I think it's cute. And then I've got this candle called Screamberry Punch. It's just like a sweet berry kind of scent. And because I'm extra, I literally spent like £8 on 3 bottles of this pumpkin spice latte hand soap. Lord help me. That was way too much. It's very sweet. I put way too much sugar in there. I like my coffee sweet, but that's too fucking sweet. Anyway, let's go. So first things first, I want to kind of give my predictions on who I think I'll most likely align with. And I feel like what most makes sense in my mind is George R.R. Martin and Stephen King, because they're the two authors that I've read either the most from or that are most influential on the work that I'm doing currently. They're the authors that I feel like have influenced this kind of work that I'm doing right now. So obviously at the minute I'm writing like high fantasy, and so the only high fantasy that I've read ever, well, I've read Fellowship of the Ring, but yeah, not really too influenced by that because I didn't love that book. I know, don't kill me. I love Tolkien, I love his world, I love that universe, I love the films. Rings of Power it's okay. I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt. I'm waiting to see where it goes. Hopefully it'll pick up for me because I want to enjoy it. I'm really trying to enjoy it. There's something about it that's just not clicking with me. But we're not here to talk about Rings of Power today. But yeah, mostly George R.R. Martin and A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, whatever you want to call it. I feel like that's my biggest inspiration when it comes to high fantasy. Obviously there are other influences from, you know, the Harry Potter books, which I read 2 years ago, like all of them. So I'm sure that probably influenced it a little bit. But I haven't really read that much fantasy in my life, high fantasy that is. So if I had to put my bets on anybody, I'd say George R.R. Martin. The way I'm going to structure this video is I want to kind of go from a scene by scene basis, and then chapter by chapter, and then the whole thing. And maybe have like a bit of a tally to see who on the list gets more points and who gets less, I guess. So let's get into this, shall we? What I'm going to do to start off with, I'm going to take the first scene from each one of the chapters and input each scene and see what we get. I'm not going to go through every single scene in the book so far because that'd literally take me like an hour. So I'm just going to do the first scene from each chapter and then we'll see who we get for each one. I apologize if you can hear the car outside. We've just got new neighbours and I swear to God, they are outside on the front with the fucking engine on for like multiple hours a day. I don't know what they're doing. They don't even drive anywhere half the time. They just sit out on the front with the engine on. for like hours at a time.
Where'd you get your car from, eh? It's lovely.
What are we doing? So I apologize if you can hear like rumbling in the background, that's just them. So yeah, let's take from scene 1. I'm not going to show you the actual scenes, but I'll show you when I import them. Okay, so I'm excited to let's see who we get for the first scene. Okay, so we've got the first scene. I've just copied it and I'm just going to put it into the program and see who we get. Let's see. Interesting. So I got Neil Gaiman first. Huh. See, that's surprising to me because I've never read any of his books. Like I said in my last reading, well, my book shopping / TBR, I mentioned there that I'd never read any of his stuff and I haven't. That's interesting to know, actually. I wasn't expecting that. Obviously I've watched stuff like TV shows and films and whatnot that are based on his works, but I've never read anything by him specifically. And so that's interesting. So that's 1 score for Neil Gaiman. Cool. Right, and then we're going to do scene 1 for Azakira next. Analyze Frank Baum. I don't know how you pronounce that. Huh. He wrote The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Interesting. I do have The Wizard of Oz, the book. It's one that I've got in like a classics collection. I've never read it though, so that's interesting to know. That does make sense, to be fair, because out of the 3 main POVs of the book, or the 3 POVs of the book, he has the most fantastical story, I guess. Like, there are a lot of fantasy elements with his story, and so I can see that. So let's put his name into Google Docs. So that's 1 for L. Frank Baum. No idea. Analyze. So this is for Finnan's first scene, and I got Gertrude Stein. Again, never heard of her. Apparently she was an American writer, poet, and art collector who spent most of her life in France. I don't think I've heard of any of her books. It looks like she mostly writes poetry, and I don't really read poetry. I've read a bit of poetry, but it's not for me. I don't get it. So that's interesting that I've been compared to a poet. Like, it doesn't seem like she writes fantasy, so interesting. Okay, so that's 1 for Gertrude Stein. 1 point. And now let's do Orla's second chapter, first scene, and this is her only scene actually. So for Orla's second chapter, Neil Gaiman again. That's 2 for Neil Gaiman. Huh. That's the first repeat, so Neil Gaiman's got 2 so far. Actually, I should probably label this. Break this up into scenes, chapters, overall. Okay. Now we're going to do Azakira's second chapter and his first scene for his second chapter. We got Ursula K. Le Guin. Now I do know who that is. She wrote the Earthsea books. I've been wanting to read those for a while. I've just not gotten around to it. Alright. So that's our first point for Ursula K. Le Guin. 1. And now let's do Finnan's chapter 2 scene 1. Another one for Gertrude Stein. So that's the second one now for Finnan. Let's go on to the next one. Orla scene 1 chapter 3. See who we get for her. Rudyard Kipling. Never heard of him. Oh, you wrote the Jungle Book. Okay. I've never read the Jungle Book. I've seen the film, but I haven't read the book. So that's 1 for Rudyard Kipling. Let's move on to the next one. Charles Dickens. Now, I have read some of Dickens' work. I read A Christmas Carol. In fact, I studied A Christmas Carol. I know that book and all of its iterations word for word. Because in our English class in school, it was one of the books that we studied. And so we watched the film, the Jim Carrey version, over and over and over and over again. So I know the film off by heart. I know the book off by heart. And I do really like it. I like the book. I like the film. I watch it every year. I haven't read much of his other stuff though. Did he write Oliver Twist? I feel like I'm being stupid. Oh no, it was Charles Dickens, okay. I thought I was being dumb there. Yeah, I used to be obsessed with Oliver Twist. I went through like a period of time when I was like, I don't know, 10 maybe a bit younger than that when I was just obsessed with all the twists for some reason. I can kind of understand that because Finan, because that's a Finan's first scene of his 3rd chapter, and Finan is like this, he's probably the poorest of the 3 POVs. Like, one's the Empress, so obviously she's rich, she's got money. And then we've got Azakura, who's kind of like, I mean, he's a bit of a nomad, but he has plenty of money. He just doesn't really spend it in the way that, say, an Empress would spend it, or somebody like a lord or lady. He doesn't, because he travels around a lot for work, and so I can see that for Finan because he's more of like a low income, lower in society kind of character, a bit like a Victorian workhouse child, although he's 19, so he's not a child, but you get where I'm coming from. I can kind of see why he'd get a Charles Dickens comparison. So this is for Azakura's 3rd chapter, 1st scene. Leo Tolstoy. What? Leo Tolstoy? I wasn't expecting classic Russian literature, but okay. I have actually read some Leo Tolstoy. When I first got back into reading, I went a whole year where I was mainly reading classics, and Anna Karenina was one of the classics that I read. I didn't actually end up finishing it because it is a very chunky book, and I never managed to get through it. I think I got like 600 pages into it, so I got close to the end. I just didn't end up finishing it. I'll read it one day. And I did enjoy it. It's not like I didn't enjoy it, it was very long and it was taking a very long time to finish it, and I wanted to read other stuff, and I wasn't in the headspace to be reading multiple books at the same time like I do now, and so I just kind of put it down and never picked it back up. Getting a lot of classics. Leo Tolstoy. This is for Finan's 4th chapter and 1st scene, and he got Neil Gaiman. Another one for Neil Gaiman. That's 3 now. We're on the last one now, so Orla's chapter 4, scene 1. Anne Rice. Very interesting. I could see that. I could see that. So she wrote the, if I'm not mistaken, the Interview with a Vampire. She wrote that book series. So I know who she is. She actually died recently, I think. So R.I.P. Anne Rice. I haven't read any of her work, but I've heard Interview with the Vampire is a good book, so I'm probably going to read that one day. I feel like it's one of those books that's kind of on my TBR. Okay, so that's everything. That's everything for all the first scenes of the chapters so far. So that's one for Anne Rice. Cool, so now let's do chapters as a whole. I'm actually just going to go and do that off camera. Alright, so I'm on the last one now. Analyze, let's see what we get for the last chapter. H.G. Wells. That's the first one for H.G. Wells. He wrote a lot of very well-known books. The Invisible Man, The Island of Dr. Moreau, The War of the Worlds, The Time Machine. I haven't read any of these books, but I know who he is. He's very influential. So, okay, that's who we got for all of the chapters. So we got 2 for Neil Gaiman, 1 for Rudyard Kipling, 3 for Charles Dickens, 3 for Gertrude Stein, 1 for Leo Tolstoy, and 1 for H.G. Wells. And now I'm going to see what we get for the entire book overall. I would not be surprised if I have carpal tunnel now after all that clicking. Holy shit. My wrist hurts. Alright, so we're on the last one. This is the book overall. So this is who I write most like overall, I guess. So let's see. Who do we get? Neil Gaiman. Alright. I was kind of expecting that, to be honest, because I've got a lot of Neil Gaiman. Cool. So overall, it seems like I write most like Neil Gaiman, and I'm going to rank the scores highest to lowest. Alright, so from highest to lowest, we got some tied. So from highest to lowest, we have Neil Gaiman at the top, tied with Gertrude Stein, both at 5 points. Charles Dickens got 4 points. Leo Tolstoy and Rudyard Kipling tied for 2 points each. Anne Rice, H.G. Wells, L. Frank Baum and Ursula K. Le Guin each got 1 point. Quite a varied selection of writers, I feel like. We've got some classic literature in there. We've got some high fantasy, like kids books, some more contemporary stuff. I think this was very insightful. The scores are in, and it looks like Neil Gaiman is who I most write like when it comes to fantasy, at least. I'll have to do this when I rewrite my other book that I've already written. I'm currently editing, and I'll be rewriting that in November. So at the end of November, I might do this again. once I've rewritten that book and see who I get for that. But for this one, we got Neil Gaiman so far. So what have we learned? We've learned that you don't have to have read somebody's work to be able to write like them, apparently. Also, I'm quite intrigued now to find out what Neil Gaiman's writing's like. And obviously I'm reading Coraline near the end of this month, and so I'm even more interested to see what his writing style's like and to see if it's comparable to me in any way. I mean, I know he writes a lot of fantasy, if not straight up fantasy inspired stuff. So in a lot of his work, even though it's contemporary, it's also very inspired by fantastical things and fantasy in general, myths, legends, like American Gods and Coraline and Stardust, all very influenced by fairy tales and fantastical things, myths and legends and religions and things like that. So, and I'm also very inspired by myths and legends and whatnot. I always have been all the way through my life. I used to have this book of mythological creatures and I was obsessed with it. I got it from one of those World Book Day events from school where they come in with the trolleys and they're covered in books, and that's where I got it from, and I took that book everywhere with me. I was obsessed with it. I think I still have it somewhere actually. It was basically just, it had loads of different mythological creatures and like information on them, where they came from, pictures of them, things like that, and I absolutely loved it. I adored it. Even before I got that book, I was always interested in, you know, like ancient Egyptian gods and Norse mythology, and even like urban legends and current mythology, stuff like, I mean, I know Bigfoot, the idea of Bigfoot's been around for a long time, but I used to be obsessed with Bigfoot and, you know, aliens, the Loch Ness Monster, Mothman, like, you know, all that stuff. I used to be obsessed with it, and I still do really like that stuff, as well as like historical folk tales. I just think that sort of stuff's really interesting, so I am really inspired by that. And I'd say that it seems like, to me at least, from what I know about his work, that Neil Gaiman was also inspired by those kinds of things. I wouldn't be surprised. So I can see the connection there. And I actually wanted to put some of that sort of stuff into my work as well, especially with the fantasy. I really wanted to incorporate a lot of legends and mythology and folklore type stuff and interesting creatures and, you know, things of that nature. I didn't get any hits for Stephen King, any hits for George R.R. Martin, which I'm a little bit surprised by, but I don't know how many authors and what authors are actually in the thing, so I don't even know if they'll show up for anybody. Like, I don't know how many authors are in the database for that program, so I don't know. Maybe they're not even in there, but I'd be surprised because they're pretty big authors. But either way, now we know. Neil Gaiman. So do with that information what you will. If you like Neil Gaiman, when my book comes out, give it a go. You might like it. But that's going to be it for today, you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe if you want to, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!